Hi, everyone. Welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today, we have a very special guest, Nabila Rodriguez. She's a gastronomic scientist and soon to become, if everything goes right, the third doctor in gastronomic sciences in history. Hi, Nabila. How are you?
Hello, Eric. That is a hopefully I will be the first. But yes, that is a huge title. I'm scared about that.
Next month, you're presenting your thesis, right?
Yes, next month, by the end of the next month, yeah.
And what's the topic of your thesis?
The topic I have been researching about the sensation is a Japanese name called koku. And I analyzed all the protein behind and how we can increase the palatability in plant-based food in order to accelerate the green transition. Yeah.
Well, the reason I invited Nabila today is not to talk about science, but also to mention she has worked at Harvard University assisting in the cooking and science course, and also the development lab of alchemists in Copenhagen. But today we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Canarian gastronomy, since she's from the Canary Islands. First of all, what are the main components of Canarian gastronomy? I know the arrugadas potatoes are very famous. There's a lot of relationship also between Venezuela and the Canary Islands. There was a lot of exchange during the colonial times, and also our accents are very similar, which I didn't know, but it's related. It's because of that, for that exchange in colonial times. Yeah, but going back to the topic, what's the deal with Canarian food? I know you have plantains, cheese, potatoes.
Canarian area is a quite interesting area in Europe because we are very close to Africa, but we belong to Europe. But also we have a lot of connection with South America. So that's the reason we build a gastronomy very different than the rest of Spain, based on a lot of potato, for sure. That's the reason one of the most traditional and famous dish is papas arrugadas. And then we have a lot of tomato, but also we have as well one of the avocado species in Europe, because all of them are from South America. So we have our own species here. And also we have a coffee plantation and very unique wine because of our volcanic soil. So develop a very interesting and unique flavor through the fermentation process in wine. And also cheeses. We eat a lot of cheese. And we have a different technique of fermentation as well. So that's the reason we are very different than the rest of Spain, because our interaction between Africa, Europe, and of course, and is the strongest is South America.
Because geographically, you could say it's Africa, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to the Canary Islands, but I also have to say the arrugadas potatoes, let's dive into that, because that's something my dad would cook in Venezuela at home. And it's an interesting way of cooking potatoes, because you want to do this with small potatoes, like let's say la rat could be a good potato for that. And you cook it in a very, very, very salty water, like over salted. And once the potatoes are cooked, you open the lid of the pot and you let all the water evaporate. And this makes like a salt crust around the skin of the potato. And arrugadas means wrinkled. So the potatoes get like this shape. And these are extremely delicious with mojo rojo. What is mojo rojo? It's one of the signature salsas of Canarian gastronomy.
Yes, one of the...
mojo picon,
Mojo picon, yes, exactly. And we have a red mojo and a green rojo. For potatoes is red. And it's a sauce. Actually, mojo is from Portugal, means sauce, basically. And it's based on paprika, and depending on the season, we can add different ingredients, because something that is very unique in Canarian gastronomy is like Canarian always has been a very poor area. So we're trying to use all the ingredients that make something very simple but tasty. That, for example, mojo and potato. Potato is just potato with salt, but we have the way and the method, the cooking method, in order to prepare a very delicious and tasty dish. So mojo is based on paprika, basically, but then depending on the season, for example, we have an almond season. So when we have almond season, we add season, and it depends, of course, the area in the Canary Island where you are. If you have almond, you add almond. Also cumin, salt, and oil for sure. And then depending on the family, they have, there is a lot of recipe around the mojo picon because each family has their own recipe. But basically the base for mojo is the paprika, cumin, salt, olive oil, and a bit of a vinegar as well.
What kind of paprika you use? Is it like a dried, rehydrated one, or like ñoras or this kind, or?
We have nowadays everyone is using the normal paprika, but we have a specific one, very, very spicy. Nowadays a lot of people don't use a lot of spicy one because they don't like the spicy one, but the original one is using that the small one that is like kind of chile. But for us, we call pimienta, but it's a kind of chili. Very typical here in the Canary Islands as well. Yeah.
And you use it roasted or raw or how?
Depends of the recipe. For me or for my family, my recipe is we roasted a bit the paprika and then mix everything together. But it depends of the family. Some of them is raw paprika. Yeah.
Because the first time I got to know the mojo picon, I was, like it was a very bastardized version, but a very delicious one, and double bastardized because this was a Spanish restaurant in Berlin where I was working. So it was like adapted recipes for the German public, but at the same time with the ingredients that were available. So we would make like a blend piquillo peppers and add garlic, cumin, coriander seeds, and this was delicious. We would serve this with the bravas. Also, the color was very beautiful. It was like a very vibrant red. But then I went to the Canary Islands and everybody was like, "Oh, blasphemy! What are you doing? You can."
Honestly, here, I think that is the way or the principle to make mojo. Like use wherever you have around you. Because it's very, very traditional. Of course, here, for example, we have some specific. I want to try to keep our recipe all the time. So that's a reason for a lot of people here in the Canary Island when somebody use something completely different, was like, no. That is no mojo. That could be something else, but no mojo. And yes, we try to keep our tradition.
And what about the green one? The green one is like with coriander, right? Like fresh coriander and oil, or am I wrong?
Yes, coriander, oil, a bit of vinegar as well, salt, and sometimes people use green paprika as well, depending on what they have at home. And it's normally used for fish.
Seafood. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes for seafood in general. We have another very traditional dish that is it's a shelf. It's called lapa. I don't know in English, but it's a very small shell with a piece of meat. And we use green mojo for that as well. Yeah.
It's similar to the scallop, something like that?
Kind of a scallop, but smaller than a scallop. Yeah. But it's kind of a scallop. Yes.
Okay. And what else do I know about you also have gofio, right? Like this is an interesting grain. What I understand is that originally it was made with wheat, and then with the colonies it was made into corn. This is very common in Venezuela, like in popular neighborhoods, you will find it very often, people using it a lot.
And makes a lot of sense because of the connection between the Canary Islands and Venezuela. Actually, a lot of people in the Canary Islands are family from Venezuela or even from Cuba. So the original gofio is from barley, and it's something from our indigenous people. So it's still, we have still that tradition. I think we have very few tradition from indigenous people, so gofio is one of them. And is originally it was made with barley, And then when we went to South America, we brought corn. So we start using corn instead of barley. And nowadays, all the gofio, nobody uses barley gofio anymore. Always is with corn, toast corn gofio. And we eat for everything. Like we eat gofio with milk. We eat gofio with broth. We mix gofio, for example, with a lot of houses use the liquid from some vegetable soup and mix with gofio, and then we eat it. So we eat gofio almost every day. Not for the new generation, let's say, because it's quite a unique flavor. Let's say unique, because especially, for example, when I try to introduce gofio with my friends from other countries, papas con mojo is quite easy because everyone likes mojo with potato. But gofio is still like very challenging taste for a lot of people. For us, gofio is quite unique, but because it reminds us when eating gofio when I was a kid. So for me, it's so special food, and also because it's quite a staple food, like you can get all the energy and nutrients for there. So again, our gastronomy is based on very simple ingredients, but we try to make dishes very delicious with very common ingredients. Yes.
Talking about gofio, have you been to gofio in Madrid?
I've never been in Gofio, but I know them very well. They have another restaurant here in Gran Canaria called Cuerno Cabra, but I really want to go. Yeah.
Yeah, so to mention a little bit, this is a couple. I'm afraid I don't remember their names, but I was there eating. They have this restaurant called Gofio in Madrid, which has a Michelin star. And this guy like really like badass looking, like all tattooed, like I don't know how to describe, maybe rockabilly style, something like that. And he's a chef, she's the maître and the sommelier, and they do super ultra. They even have like a slogan like hyper Canarian and something like that.
Exactly, it's so cool. They are Aida and Safre. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And they are doing a very nice and very cool work because it is a one Michelin star restaurant where a lot of people go there and try, I think, a real Canarian food in a high quality level of Canarian food, because of course here in the Canary Island, we don't eat like in Gofio, if you go to Gofio. But in general, all the vibe and the taste and all the ingredients are very from the Canary Island.
Yeah, that's what I felt exactly. Like it's like a very elegant way of cooking. You know, very little elements, beautifully plated, and every dish had like a story. Also, the drinks, they would tell us like, yeah, this is like. I remember there was like a kind of like a roasted corn puree resembling gofio, and you could get these flavors, but in a very enhanced way of having those flavors. I really recommended Gofio in Madrid. Also the drinks. I was also in Canary Islands one, and you mentioned the minerality of wine. I was eating at Kabuki because a friend of mine used to work there. So I was having mostly sushi, but all of the drinks were Canary wines. And I remember, yeah, the minerality is amazing. And there was even one that it had a smell of plantain. But they told me, no, this is also like an effect of the minerals. This has nothing to do with the plantains growing in the island and everything.
Yes, also wine for us is getting very famous now. For example, I have a good friend who is a winemaker producing his project is Bien d'Altura, and he's trying to produce a natural wine. And the taste of a wine is a very characteristic from the Canary Island, because we are a volcanic island. So you can drink a bit of the Canary Island through our wines. It's quite unique because none of them even taste like egg. Of course, because our soil and the high minerality in our soil. So you can taste as well through our wines, Canaria. Basically, yeah. Sounds very romantic, but it is true.
Do you have like a wine denomination, like in the Canary Islands?
Yes, actually, we have one per each island.
Ah, okay.
And no La Graciosa, because it's quite new La Graciosa as an island. But all of the island, we are now 8, but 7 of them are a specific denomination of wine. Yeah.
Okay. What about cheeses? You also have like a super particular kinds of cheeses, right?
Yes. We love, in general, Canarian people love cheeses, and sometimes when people say, we in Spain, we don't know anything about Canarian cheeses, and I always answer the same thing, like, we eat all the cheeses, so we don't have cheeses to bring to Spain. And it's quite, for example, there is one very characteristic that is called queso de flor. In English is a flower cheese. Flower cheese. And the coagulation is through a specific plant, a specific flower. They use the enzymatic activity from the flower in order to coagulate milk. And also, those kind of cheeses are from transhumancia.
Yeah, that's like being nomads, right?
Exactly. So still, many of at least 2 families in Gran Canaria, I'm talking about Gran Canaria, my island, they're still doing that. So the shepherds more than nomads. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Probably the milk is completely different because all the animals are eating around different areas and different plants around Gran Canaria, and you can taste that as well in the cheese. But basically, the most interesting part is the way that we made the cheeses through flour. So it's quite interesting as well, and so delicious.
Oh, nice. That's super, super interesting. What about desserts, sweets? Well, what is a typical sweet? Something with plantain, maybe? You have a lot of plantain.
We have a lot of desserts based on almond, because we have a lot of almond tree.
Okay.
One of them is bien me sabe. I don't know how to translate that in English.
But we also have that in Venezuela. Bien me sabe is like
really.
Yeah. Like I don't know if it's the same version, but bien me sabe is it tastes good to me, like in one word, everything together. But how is the Canarian one? I couldn't even tell how the Venezuelan one is because it was not part of my childhood memory. But I know there is a dessert called bien me sabe.
Honestly, I don't know exactly the recipe, but it's mostly based on almond, and it's so sweet. That is the only thing that I can tell you. Like, it's so sweet. That's the reason for me it's quite challenging taste. But people use for everything, just for pudding, for everything, we add bien me sabe. And it's quite traditional here, but also, of course, gofio mousse. We use gofio for in all the version, like for everything we use gofio.
I mean, you've been living abroad so much in different countries, and I can imagine there is always a situation where you have to cook for friends, and they always ask to make something from your homeland. Like, what is your weapon of choice when you have to cook for friends, like in a dinner party?
Yes, I've been living in different countries, and of course, always I have to cook something because I'm always talking about my islands. So people say, "Okay, you have to cook for us." So normally I cook potatoes with mojo because it's quite easy and it's very tasty. And then once I made a sancocho. Sancocho is a dish probably you have as well in Venezuela.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in many countries in South America, they also have sancocho, everyone with a single version. Mm-hmm.
And this dish reminds me because it's very traditional for Easter week. And it's based on potatoes, sweet potatoes, fish, and gofio. We call fish that gofio peya because it's gofio with water and salt. It's
like a soup, right? Like a kind of...
No, everything is separate. Okay. No, it's not a soup. Probably it's completely different. And once I made sancocho as well, and people love it. But gofio is still a very challenged flavor for people who don't grow up with that flavor.
Yeah, and I also, now that we talk about Canarian food and everything, I also wanted to make some questions about your life as a gastronomic scientist. I know that there are like disclosure agreements and everything, but how is the life of a gastronomic scientist working in a lab of a restaurant? What is the day-to-day activity? How is that? How do you work?
I'm a completely different person when I work in a lab than when I work in a restaurant because, first of all, gastronomic scientists are kind of people in between everything in gastronomy. For example, for me, working I worked in the restaurant Alchemist in Copenhagen for almost 4 weeks, and for me, the way that chefs work are completely different than the scientists work. So I have to get used to, especially the velocity, the speed.
Mm-hmm.
In the kitchen, the chef is always running all the time, and for me, I have to research a bit. I have to read before going to the kitchen. So take time. So it's a bit like controversial sometimes for me because I want to run like chef, but at the same time, I need time to read and to understand, to describe or design my experiment. So at the beginning was a bit challenging to work in a restaurant, especially because we are people working in a kitchen because we are no chef, but also at the same time we are not a natural science, like a proper natural scientist. So some point of my career, I was wondering like who I am actually, because I know a chef, I know a natural scientist anymore. I'm in the middle. So if I have to describe my daily routine as a gastronomic scientist, I can describe as a bridge between science, natural science or social science and chef. Because even if we think that we speak the same language, we don't. So that's the reason a lot of time scientists and chefs don't understand between each other. So for me, mostly is the bridge between them and trying to translate the knowledge between both fields, basically.
And I guess that's also the key difference between a gastronomic scientist and a food scientist, because I had experiences with food scientists. They're very technical, and for them sometimes they don't care or they don't see the difference between making a cookie and food for pets, because they're just looking on whatever, like hydration, texture, this or that. While a gastronomic scientist, as you said, there's a lot of culture, cultural context, and many other layers that make gastronomy something, right?
Exactly. It's a good example, the difference between food scientists and gastronomic scientists, because for me, being as a gastronomy scientist is more focused in flavor, taking in consideration culture and tradition in food.
Uh-huh.
That is the main difference between food scientists and gastronomic scientists. And as a gastronomic scientist, I know about a lot of methods in the kitchen, and something that we are very focused is in flavor, because it's the most important part, and also chefs are focused in flavor as well. So that's the reason we are in the middle. Yeah, we are the weird people.
Yesterday, I was having a conversation about something similar. Someone was asking me, what about artificial intelligence? Will this start to design dishes and making flavor combinations and texture combinations and this and that? And I was, what I said is, okay, like the problem with that is that it's not a mathematical formula. It's not like you can mathematically or chemically prove that these two ingredients go together. I mean, there are approaches to do that, but at the end of the day, like the main, I think, layer is the cultural layer. That's why you in Canary Islands like gofio and people from other countries don't. And there are like a million examples of, like this.
Yes, exactly. AI are very controversial nowadays in gastronomy because, as you said, it's not 1 + 1 is 2 in gastronomy. It's something else. And you will have to keep in mind that when we eat something, a lot of different things is playing an important role. And of course, is not just a sensor in our brain that we can detect sugar or sensor. No, is playing a lot of different things like culture, experience, social experience. For example, I think food and eat is something that is always changing all the time through our experience as a human being. So, of course, AI can help us in gastronomy, but I think we need people still working with the AI, because it's not just mixing flavor and that's all. Like the example of gofio, for example, for me it's delicious, but for my friend it's like, what is this?
No, I completely agree. And there is like this kind of joke that anyone can try. Like if you put like the same thing, let's say a piece of chocolate, and you cut it in 4 pieces and you put it on a plate and you give it to someone and you tell them it's 4 different ones, tell the difference, they will find differences and they will think it's different, because there are so many things going on when you eat something that just with that piece of information, it changes your perception, and they will say, this is more sweet and this is more bitter and this is more this and this is more that. And this is actually something that happens while you're in a wine tasting or a beer or tea tasting. Along the tasting, the same wine will taste different because there are many variables that inside you and also in the environment that make something it's not stable, like a flavor or a perception.
Yes, exactly. Even us, always, we are changing all the time the way that we perceive food. Because for me right now, after being living in many different countries, my perception around food is completely different than my family. Even if I'm my family and I have a lot of DNA in common. But food is something else. It's not, people think that eat is quite simple because we eat few times per day if we are very lucky, and people forgot about all the process behind that. And that's something that we studied as a gastronomic scientist, like everything behind process, very natural science, but also including different actors such as a traditional knowledge, cultural knowledge, a lot of different things that are playing an important role. Because as you said with wine, depending on our experience and depending on how many wines we have been tasting before, our perception of that wine could be completely different than the person who are next to me. And of course, because we are completely different.
I once saw also a super interesting experiment. There was like this cream, like kind of like a, like a sweet cream, right? And you had like 2 different spoons. One spoon had like a rusty kind of thing on the grip, so it was kind of uncomfortable in the grip where you would take it. And the other one had like a Furby, like something really soft. And it would taste different because your brain processes the moment of tasting different if you have a different stimuli. And that's really interesting also to know.
Even, for example, the light. When we eat in a very cozy place with a very slow light, the food tastes completely different than we eat in a normal cafeteria with a very bright white light. Because it's crazy how many factors are involved when we eat a piece of something. It's crazy. I mean, for me, it's wow. All the time, it's like, wow. Even if I've been working a lot around food, it's always like, wow, human beings are amazing for me.
No, it's incredible, for sure. Like understanding the whole sensory perception of everything. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, I got the chance to see you when I was in Boston. I was visiting Patricia Jurado, I interviewed her in the Basque Cheesecake episode. And it was your last day at Harvard. You were super sad because you didn't want to leave. What can you share about that experience working at Harvard at the science and cooking course? I guess you had the opportunity to see a lot of lectures of a lot of interesting people. Was there like something you could highlight and share?
I mean, just the highlight is to be at Harvard. I mean, I couldn't imagine that I could be in a university as Harvard. And when I was there, it was amazing because the way that they teach science through gastronomy, I think is, and a lot of university around the world is doing the same based on a science and cooking course at Harvard. So it's very simple. The highlight is to be at Harvard, working with a very amazing people. And of course, because during my career, a lot of people think that gastronomy or gastronomic scientist is just going to the kitchen and cooking. And when you are in a institution as a Harvard and they have gastronomy at the same level as science, it's like, wow, that is so important to share around the world because gastronomy and food is important for human being. So something that I would like to highlight is that like the same position. And I saw a lot of students who studied completely different bachelor, very focused and very enthusiastic to go and work in a restaurant and learn about fermentation, for example, or learn about sugar or some specific topic. And it's quite interesting how they start being very enthusiastic in gastronomy for those kind of course.
That course is amazing. I don't know if they still do, but like many years ago, I got to see a lot of the whole classes published on YouTube. And basically what they do is they invite famous chefs to, let's talk about emulsion as a scientific or physical chemical concept. So they bring I remember it was from Can Giovanni, the Catalan chef, and he would make like an alioli in the ancient way with his bare hands, only garlic and oil. And he was sweating there doing the emulsion in front of everyone. And and also like many chefs like Grant Achatz, David Chang, Harold McGee, like the big names in the industry.
Yes, that is also very nice from Harvard because they invite chef and also something very interesting that is a public talk. And then they have a class with all the students, but they open the course for everyone in Boston to want to learn about science and gastronomy. So it's quite nice to be involved in this process. And that is the highlight of my. Of course, I was so sad when I was there before coming to Europe because everything for me there was like wow. Everything was super new because I was there because I was finishing my master's, so it was very new in gastronomy and science. So for me, everything there was like wow. I want to be there.
It's a beautiful city, Boston.
Exactly. Yes. Plus, it's a beautiful city. Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.